July 1943, the Eastern Front. Hitler launches an unprecedented Panzer Blitzkrieg against Stalin's formidable Red Army.
We were more and more convinced that we could do it.
Two armored giants go turret to turret in the biggest tank battle in history.
It's just as if two bulls would run into each other.
Defeat is not an option. At stake is nothing less than the fate of the Second World War.
In my soul, I knew one thing and one thing only. Whether or not I die, I would stay on the spot till death, and I will win.
This is tank warfare at its bloodiest. This is the Battle of Kursk. Brooding across the vast steppes of southern Russia, this bell tower stands guard over the killing fields of Prokhorovka. A sentinel at the epicenter of what was the biggest and bloodiest tank battle ever. And in the course of a single day, thousands of soldiers paid the ultimate price. Surrounded as far as the eye can see by wheat and rye fields, in 1943, this was the epicenter of what was the biggest and bloodiest tank battle ever recorded in the annals of armored warfare. Operation Citadel, Hitler's last gamble to turn the tide of the war on the Eastern Front. Since the beginning of 1943, Germany's once unstoppable advance into the Soviet Union has come crashing to a halt, and the Red Army is on the offensive. They've pushed the Germans back 180 miles. Hitler's hopes of ultimate victory on the Eastern Front seem to have vanished. In the spring of that year, he prepares for a massive counteroffensive, codenamed Operation Citadel. His plan is to launch a large-scale pincer maneuver to cut off the Soviet-held salient centered on the industrial town of Kursk. The goal, encircle and destroy more than 500,000 Soviet forces in the Kursk Bulge. Leading the attack for the first time are the elite troops of Hitler's Praetorian Guard, 3 Panzer Grenadier divisions of the infamous SS, including the Death Heads. Recruited from the ranks of the Hitler Youth, these new recruits to the Eastern Front are fearless and fanatical.
We were all under 20 or 25, and we were all faithfully German, who believed in their fatherland.
For the attack, the Germans have amassed 780,000 men, close to 10,000 guns, and 2,500 tanks. Hitler is convinced that the sheer weight and momentum of his panzer divisions must carry the Germans to victory. He delays Operation Citadel by more than 3 months until he can deploy his latest secret weapon, the newly designed Panther tank.
Before that, we only had the Panzer III and the Panzer IV, and there we got the Panther. It was faster, more maneuverable, and also had a good gun.
But the delay gives Stalin the time he needs to prepare. His strategy is to build strength in depth. To meet the expected Panzer onslaught, they begin to lay mines, and thousands of conscripts dig anti-tank ditches and trenches. Their plan, to absorb wave after wave of attacks and bleed the German blitzkrieg dry.
In my soul, I knew one thing and one thing only. Whether or not I die, I would stay on the spot till death, and I will win. I would only be in one mood, to kill as many Germans as possible.
To meet the impending German attack, the Soviets mobilize almost 2 million men, 25,000 guns, and more than 5,000 tanks. The Soviet war machine goes into overdrive in the months leading up to the battle. What the T-34s may lack in firepower compared to the newer German rivals, they'll make up for in sheer scale of numbers.
And we had many of those tanks. Many. I love it. I'm in love with that tank.
The T-34 is the backbone of the Soviet Armored Corps. Equipped with a 76mm main cannon and 1.8 inches of sloping frontal armor, the T-34 is a perfect balance of firepower and protection. By the early summer of 1943, the Red Army has dug in thousands of tanks, and across the vast Kursk salient, they've laid more than 400,000 mines and have prepared over 2,500 miles of trenches. Finally, they are ready for the Germans to attack. And at midnight on July 5th, that's exactly what the Germans do.
What happened was a sea of fire, constant shooting, constant explosions. The sound was intense, to the point of blocking your hearing. It was extremely hard to gather your surroundings. Everyone, all of us, are scared of dying. That's clear to everyone. But it's important to overpower that feeling. Overpower it.
In the southern sector, the German blitzkrieg is spearheaded by the SS Panzer Grenadier divisions. Their mission to drive straight through the Soviet defensive lines to Kursk, their right flank protected by the 3rd Panzer Corps, whose first objective is to secure a vital bridgehead across the Donets River, and to do it at first light in the face of murderous fire.
In front of us were the infantry and the sappers, who had already crossed the river and suffered a lot of losses.
German sappers have built a bridge across the river. The Red Army artillery zeroes in on the crossing point.
In the tank, we could close our hatches and we were safe. The sappers were just sitting there with only steel helmets and a whistle in their mouths.
The water seems to boil in the fury of the artillery attack. Rugel makes it across with most of the other tanks and comes up against another obstacle: mines. These are anti-personnel mines that are meant for infantry, and they shatter harmlessly against the tank's armor. But the second company to the right drives straight into a field of anti-tank mines, and the tracks of all 12 tanks are damaged, and the Tigers crippled. On the right flank, the Germans suffer heavy losses. But nothing can stop the SS in the center. They punch a hole 13 miles wide and 10 miles deep into the Soviet defensive line.
When the Death Skulls came, they were afraid. We had good soldiers. We had the reputation that we were just breaking through everywhere, that we were marching and attacking regardless of the consequences.
Ohne Rücksicht auf verdammt oder angegriffen, egal was es kostet.
And across the vast open steppes, the gunners and tankers of the Red Army must face the onslaught of the Tigers head on.
I was a commander of the 3rd Artillery Company. In order to battle with the tanks, we would create special anti-tank defense locations that were faced towards the danger zones. Of course, we always had to watch out for the Tigers. From my own observing station, we spotted a Tiger that was stationed on a high point on the field and was firing away at our tanks. It just stood there, and it would not let any of our tanks come close. No matter what we did, how we tried to go in, from right or left, in order to blow it up.
The Tiger tank is the Germans' ultimate armored weapon. Encased in over 4 inches of armor, it is practically impervious to frontal attack. But it is the Tiger's 88mm cannon, with a range of more than 2,000 yards, that makes it the most deadly weapon on the vast and sprawling battlefields of the Russian steppes. To stand a chance, the T-34s have to get as close as 300 to 400 yards and get the Tigers on their side armor.
You see the type of situation we were put in?
And as the Tiger tanks continue their seemingly unstoppable advance, it's not only Kursk that is now at stake, but the fate of the entire Russian motherland. This is the modern-day city of Kursk, an unremarkable relic of the Soviet era in the middle of the vast Russian steppes. But in 1943, it stands at the epicenter of a titanic clash of arms. This is where the world holds its breath, and the fate of 2 mighty empires is decided. July 5th, Hitler launches Operation Citadel. His elite panzer divisions slam into the Soviet defenses, and the Eastern Front is set ablaze. In a classic pincer maneuver, Hitler launches simultaneous attacks on the Kursk salient. His goal, to encircle and destroy the Red Army. In the southern sector, the German blitzkrieg is spearheaded by the SS, who in the space of a few hours plowed 10 miles through the Soviet lines. The The tankers of the Red Army's T-34s are given orders to advance to meet the German onslaught and shore up a desperate rearguard defense. Their task is daunting: stop the relentless flow of panzers any way they can. Outgunned by the Tigers, the Soviet tankers are forced to get as close as they can and try to hit the Tigers in their more vulnerable side armor. It's an extreme risk because the Tiger can destroy a T-34 at a range of 2,000 yards. Lieutenant Vasily Bryukov commands a T-34 tank platoon. It's his task to get to the front lines and to get there fast. He's heading north to south along the River Psel, along a naturally made trench, trying to stay under cover and out of the sight of the Tiger's guns. He rolls down one of these valleys, turns, approaches the edge, and encounters a Tiger almost directly above him.
I don't think I had any emotions. Maybe somewhat of a fear, but I'm not sure. It was so sudden. The tank just showed up. The only overwhelming feeling I had was to get rid of it. To wipe it out or get wiped out.
Bryukov is lucky. He has a clear shot at the Tiger's one truly vulnerable point, the underbelly. He fires again for the kill.
As soon as he wanted to descend, I got him. That saved me. But you know, there was always fear. You can't take that away.
For a full week, the Battle of Kursk rages. Although outgunned by the Tiger, the Soviets have a seemingly inexhaustible supply of T-34s, and Hitler's master plan is beginning to falter. The Tigers of the SS continue their dogged advance towards Kursk. But Hitler's new weapon has met disaster. Rushed prematurely into action, the brand new Panther tank hasn't lived up to its billing and has proven a massive disappointment. They're breaking down on the battlefield, and only 10 out of 200 are still in action. And the 3rd Panzer Corps has been unable to break out of its bridgehead at the Donets River. Leaving the right flank of the SS perilously exposed. With urgent orders to advance, what they haven't been able to achieve by brute force, they now attempt by trickery. A secret midnight thrust straight through the Soviet defenses. It's the bold and daring plan of Major Franz Becker of the 6th Panzer Division, who has a reputation for being utterly fearless.
Becker's goal was to win over as much territory as possible to reach our target. Others said, let's wait for daylight. But he said, no, this is the perfect time for us to attack. And he did it.
Two captured T-34s are placed at the front as a sound camouflage. According to martial law, they are marked with the German Balkenkreuz, but they've been covered with blankets.
I had ordered radio silence and no firing. Silently, we passed the first enemy barricade, moving by the deadly anti-tank guns, which remained silent.
Becker is able to fool the Soviets with the distinctive noise of the T-34 engines.
A column of 22 tanks appeared heading in the opposite direction. These passed my unit almost track to track. But then 6 or 7 pulled out of the column turned and pulled in behind us. I ordered the rest to continue and placed my command tank, which was equipped only with a dummy gun, across the road in order to force the enemy tanks to halt.
He was bold. He was a good commander.
We slipped out of our tank, unseen by the Russians. Sneaking up to the tanks, we put magnetic charges on 2 T-34s and jumped into cover. The detonations rang through the night. We fetched 2 more magnetic charges and put them in place.
The blankets were then taken away and we started firing at them. It was a great success for us there. We brought a lot of Russians down.
Der Angriff wurde dann am Tag.
Becca's gamble pays off. With their flank now secure, the SS swing right to mop up one of the last lines of defense at the village of Prokhorovka before their final advance on Kursk. But what the Germans don't yet know is that 500 tanks of the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army are blocking their way. And the biggest battle in the history of armored warfare is about to begin. The steppes of southern Russia. Today, a gently rolling landscape of wheat and rye fields. In 1943, a battlefield, offering little cover and no place to hide for a 60-ton tank. July 11th, 1943. Day 7 of Operation Citadel. The SS Panzer Grenadier Divisions have blasted a hole 30 miles through the Soviet defenses. And the Battle of Kursk is about to come to a climax of unbelievable violence. The Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army has been held in reserve more than 60 miles behind the front lines. But fearing that all might be lost in the face of the German onslaught, they are now rushed into action to the south of Kursk and prepare to launch a massive counteroffensive on the Germans' right flank from the village of Prokhorovka. At precisely the same moment, the SS swings east, also towards Prokhorovka. Neither side is aware of what the other one is doing, and almost by accident, the stage is set for the deciding tank battle of the Eastern Front.
There is Prokhorovka. You see the elevation over there? That's where it is. It stood there as the silent witness of all the tragedy that exploded on these fields and on Prokhorovka. Not one of us could have guessed at the time that the small countryside of Prokhorovka beside the railroad would enter history as the place of one of the biggest, most important tank battles during the Second World War.
Evening, July 11th. From his command post at Prokhorovka, Soviet Lieutenant General Rotmistrov, commander of the 5th Guards Tank Army, spies tanks in the distance. At first, he thinks they are advance units of his own Soviet T-34s. But then, he gets a surprise. He discovers that they are German tanks. Events have outpaced the Soviet plans for a counterattack. Now they must prepare to meet the German SS head-on.
We had a very heavy, worrisome feeling on our souls. By the orders of the main commander general, we were to stay and fight to the death and not let the enemy take over Prokhorovka.
July 12th, dawn. The rumbling of tanks' engines can be heard for miles around as 300 German tanks and 500 Soviet T-34s prepare for battle. From behind a railway embankment on the Russian left flank, Savily Ilyich commands a Soviet anti-tank gun emplacement. And at 0830 hours is one of the first to spot the massed ranks of the SS advancing.
The entire field of Prokhorovka was covered with moving tanks. We aimed at the bottom of the tank or towards the lid of the tank. If the little cross bullseye mark was resting on either of those points, then the missile would go directly where it's aimed.
Снаряд точно попадет.
And that's how you could battle with tanks through direct aiming.
Man hat sehr schnell bei diesem Krieg gelernt, man konnte
You were learning quickly during this war. For example, we were all able to tell the difference, whether it was heavy artillery or light artillery firing at us. We were able to hear if anti-tank guns were fired.
schießen. Jedes Geschoss.
Every projectile made a different noise. It was very important to recognize what was firing and where it was coming from.
Sehr wichtig war zu erkennen, was schießt und woher es kommt.
And the armor-piercing ammo had a special mass inside it. When it collided with armor, it would burn through.
The Soviet armor-piercing shell has a high-explosive filler designed to pierce 2 inches of armor plating at a distance of 1,000 yards, exploding on impact and destroying the enemy tank from within. These Soviet shells engulf the tank in flames, turning them into flaming pressure cookers.
Als dann einige Panzer von uns abgeschossen.
When several of our tanks had been shot, men suffered terrible burns. A tank on my left side caught fire, and they were screaming terribly.
Die Kameraden, die rauskamen.
The tankers who made it out had terrible burns on the upper body down to the belt. It was frightful.
North of the railway embankment, in the center of the battlefield, Tank Commander Rudolf von Ribbentrop is in the first wave of the German advance towards Prokhorovka, when the Soviets take the extraordinary and reckless decision to meet them head-on.
What I saw left me speechless. From beyond the shallow rise, about 150 to 200 yards in front of me, appeared tank after tank, wave after wave. There were too many to count. It was a simply unimaginable assembly, and it was moving at a very high speed.
And suddenly, we were on the same path, face to face. They didn't expect us to come upon them so fast, and we didn't expect them either.
The SS adopt the Panzerkeil, a wedge-shaped formation with Tigers at the point and lighter Panzer IVs at the side. Their aim to use their heavy armor to bulldoze straight through the enemy lines. Soviet T-34s lead a cavalry charge across the open fields to meet the deadly Panzerkeil. Outgunned by the Tigers, their only hope is to get as close as possible, as quickly as possible.
They probably thought we would be further off. But no, here there were two huge masses colliding. And at first, everyone was sort of confused and dumbfounded.
At that second, I said to myself, it's all over now.
We started killing each other, head on.
Get more greatest tank battles at military.discovery.com. July 12, 1943. In his pursuit of victory on the Eastern Front, Hitler has gambled everything on the success of Operation Citadel. And the mettle of his feared panzer divisions is put to the test on the steppes of southern Russia. In the northern sector, the advance of the German 9th Army has ground to a halt, still 50 miles short of its objective of Kursk. Everything now hinges on success in the south, where the SS have come up against the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army on the fields of Prokhorovka. Needing to get within range, the Soviet T-34s charge at full throttle against the advancing SS. It's an all-out fight for survival at point-blank range. In the first wave of the German advance is SS tank commander Rudolf von Ribbentrop.
My driver called over the intercom. Sir, to the right, right. The gunner traversed right. Soon the first round was on its way, and with its impact, the T-34 began to burn. At the same instant, the tank next to me took a direct hit and went up in flames. His neighbor was also hit. We had no time to take up defensive positions. All we could do was fire. From this range, every round was a hit. I realized there was no chance of escape. All we could do was take care of what was at hand.
The battlefield is a chaotic mass of tanks firing at point-blank range. For the tankers on both sides, it's kill or be killed.
And so it began, shooting at each other, practically point blank. 100 meters, 200 meters. You did not need a long-range gun. You can just shoot head on. No one knew the situation. Not the army generals, not battalion generals, not any of the commanders of brigades.
We were prepared. We were young guys. Order is order and attack is attack. But we couldn't know that a battle like this would develop, as we were just unimportant grunts. Maybe the generals might have known this.
It was a test of nerves for people. That's why, at that age, I got my silver hair early. Became silver-headed.
By midday, the entire battlefield has been set ablaze and become a hellish inferno.
The fires were burning. The cars were burning and tanks were burning. The field crops were burning. Everything was ablaze. It was a horrid battle. There are clouds of smoke, as if it was a dark evening.
There's slaughter in the fields below, and from the skies above, death rains down in torrents.
Everyone was bombing. We were bombing, Germans were bombing. The Germans, I don't think they had targets. They were just bombing, and that's all.
The carnage is indiscriminate. Death comes from every angle. And it's the tankers who are caught in the middle.
Человек боится смерти.
A person is scared of death. No one wants to die.
Я даже не могу до сих
I
пор
still cannot understand how my tank got hit.
мой танк. Или
Either a bomb or artillery.
или снаряд.
Pavel's T-34 is fully loaded with fuel and ammunition. All of it ignites. He tells his commander they have to evacuate, but gets no reply. The commander is dead.
My comrade that was sitting beside me opened the lid of the tank ahead of me. Then, when I was taken out of it, all I heard was the explosion.
Снаряд. Вот
I
я
still remember this battle. Still remember it.
Only 2 members of Pavel's crew escape alive. Tank losses are reaching catastrophic proportions on both sides. But it's clear the Soviets are losing more. With defeat not an option, the Soviet T-34s attempt to block the German advance in whatever way they can, including a desperate tactic of last resort, never before witnessed in armored warfare.
It's just as if 2 bulls would run into each other.
Wenn zwei Stiere gegeneinander kommen.
July 12, 1943. The Battle of Kursk has raged for 7 days, and Operation Citadel, Hitler's last-ditch gamble to snatch victory on the Eastern Front, is about to come to a bloody climax on the fields of Prokhorovka. 300 tanks of the SS Panzer Grenadier Divisions and 500 tanks of the Soviet Red Army clash head-to-head on a battlefield measuring just 3 miles by 4 miles. It's the greatest concentration of armored firepower ever yet assembled, and a desperate fight to the death. The tankers of the elite SS have been prepared for the bloodiest of battles. But this is warfare like no one has ever seen before, and nothing could have prepared them for the kind of tank carnage now heading their way. The Soviets have been ordered to use the speed and maneuverability of their T-34s to drive straight onto the German tanks.
Ja, die sind so,
It's just as if 2 bulls would run into each other.
so, als wenn zwei Stiere gegeneinander kommen.
By deliberately ramming them, both German and Soviet tanks are disabled, but at least the Tigers and their 88mm cannons are taken out of action. The Germans have never seen anything like this before. It's the first time the Red Army have used this showstopper. With just an hour's daylight remaining, whoever wins on this battlefield will win Kursk. And it's the German tankers who, in the bloodbath, now sense victory is within their grasp.
We were more and more convinced that we could do it.
I want to tell you something.
Wir haben keine Ahnung.
We weren't afraid.
Das war
So we kept attacking and attacking.
angegriffen.
The SS advances relentlessly into the firestorm. The Soviet tank divisions are pushed back almost to the edge of Prokhorovka, and panic now sweeps through the Russian ranks.
And we just said Just like that, the lines are splitting, battalions are splitting, army is backing, and we're backing up the 5th Army.
But the Red Army generals won't give up. They send wave after wave of T-34s into the fight. No matter how many T-34s the Germans destroy, more and more keep appearing to take their place. Rudolf von Ribbentrop is overtaken by the avalanche of Soviet T-34s.
At this point, remaining stationary was the surest means of being destroyed by the Russian tanks. Just then, a T-34 halted about 30 meters off to our right. I saw the tank rock slightly on its suspension and traverse its turret in our direction. I was looking right down the muzzle of its gun. "Step on it now," I shouted into the microphone. My driver had already put it into gear. We moved past the T-34. The Russian tried to turn his turret to follow us, but was unable to do so. We halted 10 meters behind the stationary T-34 and turned. My gunner scored a direct hit on the Russian's turret. T-34 exploded, and its turret flew about 3 meters through the air, almost striking my tank's gun. While all of this was going on, other T-34s were rolling past us.
At day's end, after 11 hours of butchery, neither side has gained any ground at all. The Germans and Soviets are back literally where they first started. The battlefield belongs to neither, and Prokhorovka is strewn with the burned-out corpses of their tanks.
The battlefield seemed like a cemetery of armored tanks and technology. On the entire field, on the ravines, on the edges of the forest, lay hundreds of damaged German and Soviet tanks.
At Kursk, the German blitzkrieg on the Eastern Front has hit its brick wall. In the face of fierce Soviet resistance, neither arm of Hitler's pincer has come anywhere near to reaching its target, and Kursk itself remains unscathed. Losses on both sides are enormous. Operation Citadel has taken the lives of 80,000 men and destroyed nearly 3,000 tanks. But the Soviets have held off the Germans. For the Red Army, it will be remembered as a great victory. The day after Prokhorovka, with news of the Allied invasion of southern Italy, Hitler calls off Operation Citadel altogether to deal with a war which is now on two fronts. The battle for Kursk is over, and for the Germans it represents a massive and irreparable failure. From these fields of Prokhorovka, they begin a retreat which within 2 years will take them all the way back to Berlin.
For our morale, it was really upsetting for everybody. What? We're going back? That doesn't happen to us. We didn't shout hooray anymore.
In a single day on these killing fields of Prokhorovka, death harvested thousands of soldiers' lives. For many, it is a place of sacred memory, where the heroism of the Red Army's tank crews saved the Russian motherland.
I think this was a huge battle, made for history. Historians have rightfully recognized this battle as one of the greatest battles that decided the fate of the war. The fate of the war was set after the Battle of Kursk.
This was the turning point for the Red Army. I remember my friends who have passed away. I am always remembering them. Always. Always will be remembering them. My friends. May they rest in peace, as they say, in heaven.
Царство им, как говорится, небесное.